warm wishes and welcome to all the Swarajya viewers. We all know Dr. Pankaj Jain ji. He is a scholar of comparative religion and he worked in University of Texas and now he is with the Flame University. He has contributed very significantly to the discourse of the interaction of Dharma and science on the one hand, and about the dynamics, the social dynamics that happen in the diaspora, Hindu as well as the Jain community on the other hand. So, in both these crucial domains, the contribution of Dr. Pankaj Jain ji has been very important. And it has set a very good academic narrative that is sympathetic to the Dharmic worldview. So I welcome Dr. Pankaj Jain ji, and we will have this conversation started.
Thank you, Aravindan. How are you?
Hi. Fine. Professor Jain, how exactly you got involved from being a software professional? How you got into this Dharmic studies?
Yes, I trained in Karnataka to become a software engineer. But as I was following the trend of leaving India and going to US, my employer invited some people from North America to train us. And as they were going back to their country and we were gifting them Bhagavad Gita and Shiv Kumar Sharma and Haripratha Chaurasia's music albums, I realized that I'm missing out something. I'm leaving my motherland, but have I really dived into the cultural traditions of India? And that's where my search began for my heritage. And as I arrived in New Jersey, and then eventually at the first opportunity, as soon as I could, I became a full-time student at Columbia first, and then got into PhD at University of Iowa, and then continued my journey thereon. Right.
Professor Jain ji, actually, here in India, Hindus are a majority. Then suddenly when you go into United States, you are a minority in a radically different, culturally and socially different society. How was that feeling? How exactly you observed that shows?
Yes, that's a pretty common nostalgia or nostalgic feeling, homesick feeling for most immigrants, almost all immigrants, as they leave their motherland and go to a foreign land. It's a huge loss of one's culture, heritage, languages, people, and whatnot. So that's where I think people become even more serious about their heritage. They try to cling on to some local Hindu, Jain, Indic kind of organization, academic, cultural, religious organization. So that's why Hindus have now built more than 1,000 temples across North America in last 20, 30 years, and on, because of that loss, which is very painful. To minimize that loss, people become more serious about their culture and heritage. So everywhere we go in America, North America, we have these Sunday classes going on for kids, just to make sure that they learn and be aware of at least some part of our heritage and language also. Language is getting lost, sadly. Second generation or next generations are not able to maintain their language fluency in their spoken language. For example, Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, Gujarati, doesn't matter. It's a huge loss. But heritage or cultural values, at least through English or food habits, are surviving still. So that is happening among all immigrant communities, especially Indian immigrant community, which is the largest diaspora community in the world now. Indian diaspora is the largest in the world, as you know, Aravindan ji. And so Indians are trying their best to maintain their heritage, but it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Now, with respect to Indian spirituality and Indian spiritual traditions, are the Indian community insular with respect to their spirituality in the diaspora settings, in the entire Protestant North American setting, or the Indian diaspora religiously insular? In fact, in your book, you have given instances of how we reach out through yoga, Ayurveda, etc. But the point is still, are we, very frankly, are we a proselytizing community that goes and interacts with the people, or are we kind of an insular community like the Jews? We interact with them, but we keep our own inner core separate.
That's a good comparative community that you brought out. I think we are more like Jews, I think most of our people, I think they're still in the process of settling down, even though now they have been there for so many decades now. They're not fully ready to be able to assert their identity, their heritage, but they celebrate and appreciate when the mainstream white community embraces yoga, or if they perform some Bollywood style dancing in their Christian wedding. We become very happy and we are very proud that we are doing something good with our films or with our yoga, that non-Indians are also adopting it. But we still lack that courage or confidence or self-esteem, I think, to be able to really ask for example, a holiday for Diwali. Now, we tried very hard in Texas, but we didn't succeed because many of our own people started saying, why do we need a holiday for Diwali? School districts where more than 60% kids are of Indian heritage. Why shouldn't there be a holiday for Diwali? If it is a secular country, yes, it is a secular country, but we do have national holiday for Christmas. We do have schools closed for Good Friday, even though they may not call it a Good Friday holiday, but Good Friday all schools are closed across Texas. Christmas, of course, is a national holiday. And where in those school districts where Hindus or kids of Indian heritage are more than 60%, 70%, what is wrong in asking for a Diwali holiday? But no, our own people are so scared or so uncomfortable raising these kind of questions that it remains an unfulfilled mission for Texas. It does happen. It has happened in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Maryland, in some schools, some public schools. Public schools means the schools that are funded by American taxpayers, mainstream taxpayers. So even in those schools, there are now annual holidays for those schools for Diwali, Ramzan, Eid, and for Chinese New Year, in addition to Christmas and Good Friday in 5 northeastern states. But in Texas, it remains to be seen that it will happen in Texas also at some point. In California, I'm very surprised. I was very surprised. I'm still very surprised. Not even a single person apparently has raised the voice enough to be able to convince California decision makers, where again Asian people are at such a huge majority in some school districts in Fremont and other places, Sacramento and Irvine in California. But still there is no Chinese New Year holiday or Diwali holiday. Still has not happened even in California, which is really surprising. It's a blue state, so to speak, more progressive liberal state, as you know. So northeastern states, it has happened, but California, none of the southern states have accepted any of the Asian holidays still. So we still need to go out and, like the word that you use, proselytizing, or just to be able to really assert or ask for equal rights. We're not asking anything unfavorable or something that has not happened for other communities. What has happened for other countries communities should also be applied to our Asian communities, Indian communities. But that has not yet happened in southern states.
I want to ask another one question in this regard before we pass on to your work on science, which is very important, science and Dharma. Before that, I just want to ask this.
Sure.
When the civil rights movement happened, the Jewish community strongly identified itself with the civil rights movement. Despite the fact that the evangelical right was actually supporting the Israeli cause and all that. The Jewish community as a whole very strongly supported the civil rights movement. Now, how much the Hindu communities, the Hindu organizations there, the Hindu family of religions organizations there, they identify themselves with the Native American cause. There are kind of a dialogue between Native American spiritual traditions and the Hindu family of religions.
That's a great question also. So there is one organization that has tried its best to work with many indigenous communities across the world. But that's a very fringe, small part of the word that you use, Hindu family or organizations. It's a very, very small, probably less than 1% people, Hindu people, are even aware of this kind of an effort where, similarities are being explored between the Hindu traditions or Hindu traditional communities and indigenous communities across the world. For mainstream Indians or Asian people, it has not yet happened. There is a great scope to work more closely with indigenous communities, with civil rights-based movements and organizations, African American communities, Latin American communities, Jewish communities. But our people have, I think, we still have a lot to do in those regards. Our efforts largely are limited to either profession-based organizations, such as All Indian Doctors have created a huge, I think, the largest ethnic organization in America for doctors is of Indian doctors. So that has happened, but it is mostly for their own professional networking, or they invite star artists from India and do some fundraising for philanthropic causes. But civil rights, advancement of civil rights for Asian Indians has not yet happened to the extent that it should have happened by now. Even by great, huge, these wealthy organizations such as Indian doctors or Indian software engineers are not even thinking of those issues. They are, I think, happy with their huge cars and huge houses that they have that they're building, and they're building their temples. They're supporting their temples to their credit. But civil rights is not yet on the arena, on the radar of most of the people, at least that I have come across with. Some exceptions are, I think, the next generation of they call themselves now South Asian as they become next generation. So South Asian, next generation South Asians are doing better than the first generation that came from India fresh. So next generations are now working mostly with Muslim students and other South Asian students, college students, and so on, to raise awareness about civil rights from the next generation's perspective. But that generation, I think, lacks the passion for their heritage, that uniqueness that Indic heritage brings to the table. There, I think, their focus mostly seems to be on racial grounds, that they should get the equal rights as white people might be getting the similar rights. But that passion or that pride for unique Indic contributions to the world, that angle is missing in the next generation, obviously, because their connection to India is very thin, very intangible. Whereas the fresh who came from India, no longer for 20, 30 years, now they're in US. But those people who have come from India to US, they lack the proper training or proper orientation to be able to advance a civil rights cause, because they lack the training, they lack the awareness of what, like you already mentioned, that Jews and African Americans did a great struggle, huge struggles, ongoing struggle to assert their civil right, to gain equal civil rights. But that kind of passion for civil rights is missing from people who have come from India directly. So I try to differentiate the first generation and the next generation of Indians.
And you also said about Indians in your book. Also, you have mentioned this. You have dealt about this particular aspect in detail. That the Indians are becoming a very vibrant, economically vibrant and strong voice. Slowly, they are rising up. Now, when the West takes notice of this, do you think that the way they looked at the Jews as a kind of with the negative stereotypes? Now already I see that the media spotlight on the Hindus, when they mention Hindus and the media spotlight falls on them, it is always for the negative things, like for caste problems. And already the book Caste has come, and it has actually subordinated racism, made racism subset of casteism. And thus, do you think that the Hindu society is now becoming the next Jews? In the sense, a negative stereotype is slowly getting built around them, so that the next generation wants to move away. As you rightly said, it is now doesn't want to call themselves as Hindus. They don't want to identify themselves. Even with India, they want to identify themselves as a very neutral South Asian term.
Yes. In India, obviously, we are such a huge majority and so many millions and millions of Hindus. These questions are more, I guess, fresh and burning in our minds here. But there, the question for most Americans these days is not about these kind of issues. I think the most burning issues for America is the huge, sharply poisonous divide between Republicans and Democrats, between left and right, mainstream left and mainstream right. So Indians are somewhere sort of sandwiched between the two, because neither left fulfills what we want, nor right fulfills what we want. Some things left does that helps us and harms us. And the other things right does that helps us and harms us. So we are caught in between, in this crossfire. Any kind of movement that is going around, civil rights movement or Occupy Wall Street movement or movement against Trump, movement against gun rights, movement against any movement from left to right, it always, we are always confused. Whom should we support? Because in some cases, our values may match more with the right. In other cases, our values match more with the left. So the divide is really, so if anything, the civil unrest in America is mostly along the political lines, ideological lines, not, and then some races, some racial communities naturally identify more with the left. For example, African Americans or Latin Americans. But Jewish Americans and Indian Americans are not sure, because Jewish Americans, again, in some ways, I think their needs would be more held by Democratic Party. In other cases, their needs would be more held by Republican Party. So ours is a similar case. So we are not really target of any sort of attack yet in a big way. Yes, there are stray incidents of racial attacks against us, and those are mostly by right. I have to point that out. So white nationalists, when they are thinking of white nationalism, everybody is an enemy. Hindus are enemy, even Jews are enemy. Of course, African Americans are enemy, Latin Americans are enemy for white nationalists. Only white people, only Protestants have the rightful place to live in America from their perspective. So if white nationalists have their day, we are in their crossfire. But white nationalists are already hugely attacked from everywhere else, from every media outlet except Fox News. There are some exceptions on Fox News that support white nationalism, not openly, but in a very in a subtle way. But most media outlets are strongly against white nationalists. Most, of course, entire Democratic Party openly will criticize white nationalists. So in that regard, we are helped when these voices rise against white nationalists. So it's a very complicated issue. So I don't think we are going to be attacked like Jews were attacked in Germany, to coming back to your question. So we are safe that way. But we never know, because the world is becoming so poisonously divided more and more because of these Twitter storms and all kinds of ideological poisonous battles and divides. We never know when we might get caught into this crossfire. So we have to be very aware and really be on lookout of what is happening in America. It's a volatile situation. And like we saw last month, the Capitol riots, it might happen again. The climate is extremely harsh in America as we speak right now. Millions are still out of power in Dallas, in Texas, where I come from. I was there for a decade and so on. So it's an extremely volatile situation. But the most anger, again, is against the rich elites as we speak. So to give an example of what is happening right now in Texas, the anger from left is against the rich upper middle class and upper class, who are mostly white people. So they have the power, and lower racial classes or immigrant communities do not have power. So again, this is again left versus right divide, not exactly racial divide yet. So we are okay for now, but you never know what will happen next.
One very interesting thing that I found in your book was this. It was the footnote. It was a detailed footnote about the attacks on Tulsi Gabbard.
Yes.
And those attacks, there is a kind of a forewarning that if you become powerful,
yes,
with your own culture, not like Kamala Harris, like Tulsi Gabbard. Even Tulsi Gabbard may not be an ethnic Hindu. She's just a Dharmic Hindu. So if you become powerful, then there will be these kind of attacks on you. Is it kind of a forewarning?
Yes. So I think attacks on Tulsi again came mostly from, as to the best of my knowledge, they came from I have to say right, which is fundamentalist Christians attacked her religious background of ISKCON. Her parents come from ISKCON background and so on in Hawaii.
Also from the radical left, right?
Right. So I was just coming to that. So if whatever attacks that might have come from left is because Tulsi Gabbard has many times opposed Hillary Clinton, and the big push on the military to go and attack places like Syria. See, she openly criticizes democratic leadership's views on sending troops at the first instance to send troops in harm's way to places like Syria or Iraq or Iran. She's against that kind of policy, which is the mainstream democratic position. So that becomes the reason for when you speak against Hillary Clinton or Obama or Bill Clinton, obviously radical left will also attack you. So these are two different reasons. Again, so she's caught in this crossfire because of these different reasons. So attacks from both left and right. But she's not as powerful as you might hope. She's, she's just a lone voice. And yes, she's very proud of her Hindu background, and she sends these best wishes on Janmashtami and Diwali and Holi and whatnot. But she's a really, very small tiny minority within even the left, within even the Democratic Party. So yes, we celebrate her success and so on, and we wish all our best. But it's a long way to go before she can really succeed in fulfilling the dreams and desires of all the Hindu or Indic communities in America. It's a long way to go.
This is the last question I want to ask you in this particular aspect of your studies is, if you want to provide a roadmap for the Hindu family of religionists in United States, not South Asians, the Hindu family of religionists in United States, what would be that road?
Okay, that's a huge question. First of all, would be great to really, I think you were already asking great questions. So I think I would start from where Hindu values have really succeeded and shaped some parts of America. For example, I think our values, like I trace in my book's first chapter, our values that really influenced Thoreau and Emerson, the Transcendentalists or the Boston Brahmins in the previous century. So we have to start from there. Many of our people are not even aware of those things. How we helped shape the liberal values of America, starting from Thoreau and Emerson, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, how hugely he influenced American values. Then we have to focus, really, first we have to train ourselves, right? And then we have to, I think, second big milestone that our values really helped improve America is, like you were already hinting at, civil rights movement. So we have to build on those two heritage. We have to remain connected and be proud of our Indic heritage, but we have to look at how Indic values or Hindu values helped America. So we have to look at American history. So start from Transcendentalists, then go to the civil rights movement and see and remind ourselves, we really just love this fact that Dr. Martin Luther King, in a way, sort of modern father of nation, if we can say anybody for America, that would be Dr. Martin Luther King. And he actually came to India. He visited Gandhi's home in Mumbai. He and many of his other colleagues came to India, learned how nonviolent resistance movement has worked in India. And then they helped bring those values to America and civil rights movement and how that movement still goes on, and it's not finished. That work is still going on. So I think those two would be the huge milestones where we have to. So most of the Hindus, I think they are still focusing on Swami Vivekananda. First Hindu to come to America, of course, he remains the biggest inspiration for all Indians in any part of the world. Doesn't matter America or India. But even before that, our values had already reached America through Raja Ram Mohan Roy or through Emerson, through Thoreau, and many others. And also how Martin Luther King took our values and helped improve America. So I think we have to take equal pride and equal awareness of equally more important values, equally more important milestones in American history. And I think build from there, and how we can gel in a better way with mainstream America without losing our identity, but becoming I think Zoroastrians are a great example for that. I think when Zoroastrians came to India many centuries ago, they promised the native local Gujarati emperor that we will only sweeten your milk more as sugar melts with milk and it makes it more sweet. We will not act as like a lime or lemon. We'll act like sugar and make your milk more sweet. I think that's the approach if we take in America. I think that would be a great value too. So, for example, some other values such as yoga and Bollywood dance I already mentioned, but also vegetarianism is a great gift from India to the world, and many Americans are going even beyond vegetarianism, veganism. So those are the things that I think are more and more non-violence and non-possession, cutting down our need, cutting down on our carbon footprint based on our renunciatory values that our culture already has for millennia. We have practiced these values. Our millionaires, billionaires, Birlas and Bangers never had these huge cars or huge bungalows. They all still had very simple lives, and they donated all their wealth for needy people. So those are the values I think that can really help, raise up our own community across America, and our kids, our next generation, won't have to forego their connection to the Indic heritage, because we have these great values to bring to the table and help improve America and the world even better, even more. That would be my humble.
Professor. And now I want to go to the next most important works that you have done in the field of the interaction between science and Dharma.
Right.
And in this, in your latest book, you have mentioned a very important thing, that whenever the Western academia and the academia influenced by the West, whenever they talk about the interaction between science and this, they always talk in terms of the categories of religion, whereas Dharma is something different. Can you please elaborate on that?
Yes, Aravindan. Yeah, thank you for reviewing both of my books for Swarajya. And as you already noticed from my book, as you noticed in my book, so I start from there that Dharma is not religion. Dharma is religion combined with ethics, combined with cosmic law, combined with sustainability. Dharma comes from the root dhri, which means to sustain. Sustain connects with sustainability and sustenance. Dharma is all of that. It's a support system. It's a supportive supporting force, like the Mahabharata defines, of course, and many other definitions of Dharma exist across our Sanskrit texts in Mahabharata. And in Jainism, defines Dharma as non-violence. Buddhism defines Dharma as Buddha's teachings, and so on. So Dharma is much beyond religion, which is simply faith or belief in one God, and doing prayer on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday basis, and following a book and all that. So Dharma is much beyond that. So there are, of course, many books on religion and science, and there has been always this tussle between, like one of my colleagues mentioned in Texas some time back, that there always have been this tussle between Jerusalem and Athens. Right? So Athens is representing the rational world, the philosophical world or scientific world. Jerusalem representing the religious world of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So this tussle between Jerusalem and Athens goes back to Galileo and Copernicus and on and on. But what about in Indic context, or even Asian context, largely speaking? So in India and China, if we can include China also, Chinese heritage, Chinese millennia old heritage, also I think pretty nicely would match with Indic heritage, where many of these discoveries were made by people from Dharmic background. And there is not an incidence that I can think of where a discoverer was punished or was persecuted, right? So our discoveries, such as mathematical discoveries, were all sort of made by acharyas, right? And Bhaskar Acharya and on, and right, Aryabhat and Brahmagupta and on and on. So those, so that's where I think the Dharmic world has a different relationship with the scientific discoveries, is what I wanted to propose. And from that background, I started looking for example, and I came across an NGO called HESCO, Himalayan Environmental Studies and Conservation Organization. It's an acronym, HESCO. So the HESCO was started by a botanist, Dr. Anil Joshi. He just received Padma Bhushan last year, and many other awards. And so a botanist starts a work to save the environmental resources, natural resources of Himalayas and other mountain region across India. Now, as he is a scientist, he's a botanist, PhD and professor, and he renounces his job being a professor and starts working with his students to save the natural flora and fauna of Himalayas, Haridwar and Dehradun and across Uttarakhand now. So his view is, but also is, very definitively shaped by his Dharmic background, his Hindu background. So he has no calm, or he has no hesitation in inspiring people to also worshipping, have this reverence for natural resources. In his own office, I visited his office many times. It's like an ashram. So HESCO compound is an ashram kind of, is a campus outside Dehradun outskirts. So he says, I want to focus not just on Chintan, my intellectual thinking, but I also want to be aware of Chintan to Chitta to Chaitanya. So he has a temple next to his office, Shiva temple, where he does his rituals. and he has chitta also. He also does cremation. So anybody who has to perform any cremation. So based on cremation ashes, he inspires people to plant more trees. So the cycle of this death and rebirth is very very important and very easily acceptable even by a scientist. So rebirth and rituals for Shiva and scientific discoveries and ecological activism is all gelled nicely in this one man's life called Dr. Anil Joshi, ex-professor at Haridwar University, and now simply Dr. Anil Joshi. And so this, I think that's a great example of how Dharma and science can work together and really bring out something unique. So unique things that he has done with his student volunteers and his staff now, and also I think Government of India also supports his work because it's really important work that he's doing for Himalayas. So long before Benjamin Franklin discovered electricity in America accidentally while flying a kite, like the story that we know, long before that, our women in Himalayas were already generating electricity to for their wheat flour. To generate flour from wheat, they would connect turbines, locally made turbines, with these heavy waterfalls, sharp, speedy waterfalls. So from the waterfalls, they would connect turbines, and they would generate electricity. They were generating electricity. They're simply calling it gharat. So these gharats have been producing electricity and helping the women and men of Himalayas for centuries. So Dr. Anil Joshi, what he did, he just revived those, because those local traditions were getting ignored and were getting really, they were dying. These great traditions, very helpful traditions, were being ignored especially during the British Raj. So HESCO, what they did, they just reached across Himalayas and Kashmir and Uttarakhand, across India, and they helped revive these traditions to help local communities to better redesign these kind of turbines. So again, you see these ideas from Dharma and science, from his scientific research and supporting local community, and on and on. So many such examples, I can go on and on. Yes,
it's beautiful. And you also mentioned the Punjabi NGO.
Yes.
Can you please elaborate?
Yes. So while I was working for my research with HESCO friends in Uttarakhand, there was a conference in Rishikesh at Parmarth Niketan, where Baba Sichewal came from Punjab in Sultanpur, near Shahkot in Punjab. And he told another excellent story, really interesting story that was new to me, that was 2012. And he said that with his initiative and his followers also supported him, their organization has cleaned out the entire river called the Kali Bain River, the most sacred river of Punjab. And we have not even heard, in non-Punjabis, I don't think, I had never heard that name of that river. Kali Bain River is the river where Guru Nanak actually goes and stays inside water for days. And he has this enlightenment, Jal Samadhi, we can say. He has this Jal Samadhi experience inside the river near Sultanpur, where he comes out of the water and says, there is no Hindu, there is no Muslim. And then Sikh tradition, Sikh religion starts from that mystical experience that Guru Nanak has. That particular sacred space, sacred river, was completely polluted, was a dead river, until Baba Sichewal took this as a mission, a Sikh Guru, Nirankari Guru. He's not the part of the mainstream Akali kind of tradition, but still a Sikh Guru. So he took this mission upon himself and started cleaning the river single-handedly himself. Baba Sichewal himself will enter the river and start cleaning up, start removing the weeds and so on. And then, of course, his followers also jumped in and started cleaning. And then entire river is now absolutely clean from all kinds of pollution. And they build roads, they plant trees across Punjab, and so many these things are doing. They're also doing. So that work is more towards, I would say, religion and ecology. From Sikhism, they quote Guru Granth Sahib's verses. Guru Granth Sahib itself is a combination of, as you know, many Indic texts, South Asian texts, I think some, right? So all those verses are quoted in Guru Granth Sahib, and Guru Granth Sahib verses are quoted by Baba Sichewal and his followers to help take care of their natural flora and fauna across Punjab. So those are the two lovely examples that I write in the second book. Mostly, but it's still mostly an argument for GEP, gross environmental product.
Yes, I was about to come to that. Actually, I want to ask you on that. You actually, in that, you give a critique of GDP, and you tell that there has to be an alternative. And of course, even in the mainstream economics textbook like Samuelson, he tries to dethrone GDP, at least introduce the concept and tell that we have to develop something called net economic welfare in new. But these alternatives have not actually taken off compared to GDP. Still, GDP ranks. There has been a lot of effort to dethrone GDP. Do you think that an alternative can really be brought up with the work of the ecologists, the economists, and the dharmic seers and people who are involved in dharmic ecology coming together in India and developing a new indicator?
Index, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there is an alternative. I mean, yes, you're right, absolutely right, that policymakers have not yet embraced the alternative measure of growth. But I don't think we have any alternative. We have to wake up to this, and sooner the better. Because if we measure our success or our progress, vikas, only through the output from industrial mechanisms, such as how many cars we are producing or how many jobs we are creating through industrial mechanisms, or how much food we are growing. I don't think even food is counted as GDP. Farmers' output is, I don't think, is really counted properly in GDP. We're really focusing on industrial output, which is really such a skewed mechanism to measure our development, our growth, our vikas. What Anil Joshi has proposed, and I just can't agree more with him, is that we should really measure how many trees we have grown in last 1 year, how many rivers we cleaned in last 1 year, how many mountains we preserved and protected in last 1 year, how many I'm adding from my side, how many cattle we have really successfully grown and taken care of in last week. If we don't count those resources, we are really cutting the same branch on which we are sitting. All the industrial output is happening because of the resources that are coming from villages and nature in general, but villages and forests in particular. So if we don't count those particular resources, then we are just losing out. We don't even know how much we are faring well. We have created these silos. So environmental department is a different department, right? And economics is a different. Finance ministry is totally different, and they're almost always in loggerheads, whereas they should be working in hand. Economy cannot exist without ecology. So Sundarlal Bahuguna, one of the mentors of Dr. Anil Joshi, and one of the pioneers of environmental movement in India, Sundarlal Bahuguna used to say, ecology is permanent economy. Without ecology, there is no economy. Where our resources are all coming from ecology. Our water, our timber, our minerals, are all coming from mountains and forests, and where most villagers are. So we have to be really our villages and forests and all those indigenous communities have to be in forefront when we are measuring economic progress done through last year. So that is what we have to do, and sooner the better, I think.
That actually you talked about Mahatma Gandhi in relation to the civil rights movement, but here also I think Mahatma Gandhi is very relevant, isn't it?
Yes,
because Gandhiji was the one who made such a forceful discourse regarding how these externals should be taken into account in economics.
Yes.
Long before environmental economics became discipline. And there was this economics of permanence by Dr. Kumarappa. And the whole this thing is there. Do you think that the Hindu religious or the Hindu family of religious organizations, the Dharmacharyas, now we have something called Hindu Dharma Acharya Sabha. These people should take up this issue. At least, even if the government is looking into this, the mainstream economists are looking into this. At least they should come up with an indicator based on rooted in Dharma for this.
That would be wonderful if that can happen. Oh my God, that would be a dream come true, and Gandhi's dream come true. Gandhi's vision will be fulfilled, and not just Gandhi. I think all our entire heritage is begging for better attention. Our heritage has taken care of our ecological resources for millennia, right? Before the British came, our entire land was called Shasya Shamla, which means absolutely green, right? Vande Mataram is all about our nature, right? Sujalam, Suflam, Malayaj, Sheetalam, and all that, everybody knows. So the entire praises are of our natural resources, right? We were the 30% of the world's GDP was coming from India, while we were still Shasya Shamla. Now what is happening? We are just madly rushing for more and more GDP, more and more jobs, more and more vikas. Where is Shasya Shamla? Where is Sujalam Suflam Maled Sheetalam? If that is not there, forget about GDP, right? We will be left to nothing, and we will be just such a poor and bad copy of all the failed policies of America. America has already done all those huge mistakes, and they are still doing it because of their mad rush for meat consumption. They are still destroying the Amazon forest, the rainforests in the Amazon region, because of the meat appetite of mainstream Americans. That's a huge reason for the loss of the loss of the rainforest in Brazil and South America and so on. So we better stop and wake up and take the Gandhi's vision and the vision of our entire heritage, which is to take care of ecology before worrying about economy, because without ecology, economy cannot exist. So yes, I think Gandhi is a great example, great role model, and Gandhi's values were all shaped by not just Hindu values, of course, but also he was in correspondence with Srimad Rajchandra, a Jain guru, for 6 years, and he takes all these principles to heart and renounces his clothing, starts walking like Jain monks do, and of course ahimsa and purusharth and walking, silence vows, which is very common among Jain monks. Many of those values also Jain values also becomes part of his life. From Gandhi, then so from Srimad Rajchandra to Gandhi, from Mahavir to Srimad Rajchandra, at least Jains would like to narrate this story. From Mahavir to Srimad Rajchandra, from Srimad Rajchandra to Mahatma Gandhi, from Mahatma Gandhi to Sundarlal Bahuguna, and many other environmentalists, including Anil Joshi and Medha Patkar, and on and on. I think they are all really trying to say, if I understand them correctly, that our heritage has a different vision of economical progress, and if we ignore our heritage, ignore our ecological values, ignore our Shasya Shamla, and just go for GDP, then we are just becoming a poor copy of China or America or European countries, and that would be a big peril, big loss to our heritage and to our Shasya Shamla, as I keep saying now.
Now you mentioned about the Jain heritage.
Yes.
I just want to ask one question about the science in the larger context. Now, as in Jain philosophy, in Jain Darshana, you have the Saptabanki, which is a very important way of looking at reality. In fact, the sciences, the Western scientific heritage was at a standstill when the binary mapping of the universe broke down with the quantum mechanics and all, the particle and the wave and all these kind of binary, they broke down. Now, in this connection, how do we take darshanas like Saptabanki or Satkaryavada or the different the darshanas to our children, so that they can view the entire science in terms of science? I'm asking it in terms of science because again, I also relate to this. I will ask another question. Both of you, please. Both of these questions I want you to answer. One is, how do we take the darshanas like Saptabanki, etc., to the children as part of their scientific worldview? And another one is, there is a criticism on the entire Indian heritage. It is not about one particular party or the entire Indian heritage. There is a strong criticism that it is inherently anti-science by people like Meerananda. In your book itself, in the foreword, it has been dealt with very, very nicely. And I also want to hear from you on that. These two aspects, that there is a movement to cleanse entirely the science curriculum of any Indian values. And another one is, we have to bring in Indian values, and how do we reconcile this and take it forward?
Right. Right. So that's a great question, and very, we can just talk about that for so much time. I think it's a reaction to reaction. What is happening is, one reactionary force and then other reaction. So what happened, as we all know, that early part of our independence, most of our textbooks were written by erasing many important parts of our history, parts of our heritage. I remember, as I was growing up in a small town in Rajasthan, I doubt if I really understood the value of Chanakya, for example, in the Indian context, or the value of Bhaskaracharya or Aryabhat. properly. What is their contribution at the global level? I don't think we are taught properly by our Rajasthan board textbooks or by CBSE. So my 11th, 12th was from CBSE, and of course there also we lacked that time, that perspective. So that was one way of writing textbooks. So to reaction to that came another wave, where suddenly aircrafts were being discovered from Rig Veda, right? And so then to reaction to that comes from Mirananda, that stopped this saffronizing the textbook. So it's a really, really chain reaction or going out of control to reaction to reaction to reaction. I think it's just a matter of really looking for universally valid, universally acceptable, doesn't matter by East or West. There are some things that have gone globally or gone at least in Asian context, the great values that have come from Indic traditions, which would be acceptable to both left and right. People like Aryabhat, place like Gwalior Fort. I didn't know that. I discovered this Gwalior Fort very recently, that the first historical evidence of a zero anywhere in the world is in India at the Gwalior Fort. And I've not even visited Gwalior Fort. I'm waiting to go to Gwalior Fort and see from my own eyes. I learned about this from a documentary made by a British scholar of science, historian of science, who said that, and when they are saying, of course, we have to accept that there is no saffronizing going on there, but at the Gwalior Fort wall, there is the first evidence of a zero. I didn't know that. And our kids must be told all of such examples, many such examples. Ajanta Ellora caves. What great values, artistic values. Khajuraho temples. How many of our kids have even kids or parents or teachers who has time or interest or passion to go to Khajuraho temple and see what is it all about? Ajanta Ellora, Badrinath. Why Kedarnath temple survives while an entire village is destroyed in the Uttarakhand disaster? So many Sundarbans. Why tigers are not killed by villagers? What is it that in the Indic heritage, Indic traditions, that a forest god, there is a forest goddess living in Sundarbans called Bon Bibi. Bon means one forest, Bon. Bibi, Devi, or so. Beyond Hindu-Muslim divide, beyond left-right divide, that Bon Bibi is saving the tigers and forests in Sundarban. What is wrong about teaching that to our kids? Doesn't matter, which party you belong to, left or right. But those things are still not there in our textbooks. And no party is really seriously looking for bringing these values to our textbooks. That we have to do. Everybody has to do it. Doesn't matter Indian, non-Indian, white, black, brown, red, green, whatever color, whatever party you are. I think it should be universally acceptable. There are so many other things that we can talk about. First, and on and on. Okay, yeah. So those are the values that let's not react to reactions. Let's look for some universally valid historical facts that are still missing from our textbooks. So sooner we bring those values to our textbook, coming back to your question now, I think better for our next generation, who we should be, I think, really raising as true inheritor of our heritage, of Gandhian vision, of vision of Aryabhat and vision of Bhaskaracharya and vision of Chanakya and so on. Right?
So in the whole, how you think in the future, the very coming near future, how you think the Indian science curriculum should be? Already you have given an answer. Right now I'm asking about right in the next future. Now the government is taking a lot of effort to make the children innovative. For the first time in the entire history of independent India, now the science curriculum is being made and place where the children can actually have hands-on experience on the lab. Still now it was not like that. It was completely partitioned. The labs would come at one particular time only for the sake of marks. Now we are making the children get interested in science. So for the science students, if they are to learn Dharma, what would be a book that you would recommend? Yeah. Or do you envision a textbook for that? You writing a book, Dharma 101 for science students.
That would be a wonderful project, and where I think it will have to start with our most ancient discoveries, which are valid, which are accepted across the world, such as zero, like the example that I mentioned. Even that is missing from our textbook references, like Gwalior Fort, the example that I gave. So yes, it has to start somewhere from there. I think great mathematical advances, the trigonometrical advances, the right angle theorem discoveries done by Indian people centuries before other European discoveries, and all of that astronomical discoveries, the distance between sun and earth and diameter of earth, and so many other discoveries were made by our people that are still not found in our textbooks and that are accepted universally. Those discoveries were made by Indians centuries before European discoveries. So I think that's where we have to start. And then we have to come to the, as chronologically, we have to advance and we have to write in this proposed textbook that you're proposing. It would be wonderful. And come to the medieval times where Jantar Mantar were created, the open astronomical laboratories that were created by Raja Jai Singh in Jaipur, in Ujjain, in Delhi. In Delhi, Jantar Mantar is now just a protest place. What is Jantar Mantar? Where people go and just start protesting, right? But Jantar Mantar is an open astronomical laboratory. How many kids are being taught or taken to those places where distances between sun and moon and diameter of earth were all being discovered by medieval people, people in medieval times in India, before anywhere else. So those are the places that, again, so that would have to come to our textbooks and many other, I think our ISRO-based discovery, the advances that we have made in astronomy, that also will be part of that. And yes, I think that somebody has to write that book, and who knows? Yeah.
What about the values? You are the right person to talk about that, because your Jain heritage provides you a very deep anchorage in ahimsa, and also, as I said, Saptabanki, which allows the entire existence to be seen in terms of complementarity, not conflicts. So
right.
What kind of values from India that have to be incorporated into our state?
Yes. I think three values, if I can point out, you have referred to Saptabanki many times, and let's now talk about that. So three pillars on which the Jain philosophy at least stands, which of course are now Jain, Hindu, Indian, Jain, Hindu, Buddhist, and Sikh are so intertwined. So I think largely dharmic values, if we can point on three, is that would be ahimsa, aparigraha, and anekantvad. Right? Ahimsa is coming. Ahimsa parmo dharma is coming from Mahabharata, but is most widely embraced by Jains. So non-violence. So corollary to that is vegetarianism and veganism, which is India's, I think, one of the most important gifts to the world is vegetarianism. Now, the moment I talk about vegetarianism, it can be looked at saffron eyes. Then people will say, no, not everybody is vegetarian. Yes, I know that not everybody is vegetarian in India, but the largest portion of even partial vegetarians is in India compared to any other part of the world. People might take some egg or some meat-based diet, but mostly their basic staple diet is coming from rice, lentil, and wheat. Across India, doesn't matter which part of India you are. And again, comparatively, in a comparative light, India remains one of the lowest, or probably the lowest consumer of especially red meat, the cattle, the pork, the mutton, which are the biggest reasons for the destruction of Amazonian forests, because those forests are now being replaced by animal farming, because we need people who are consuming meat need spaces, need farms where they can grow animals. So those things are not happening in India. People are not doing animal farming in India. People are still are mostly dependent on these vegetarian-based options. So the biggest, I think, dharmic value that you have been asking, Aravindan, the first value would be ahimsa and vegetarianism and veganism. That would be the first that has to come to this in this book. Second would be aparigraha, which I hinted a little bit. Aparigraha is basically non-accumulation of resources. If I have 10 shirts, I want to cut down to 5 shirts. If I have 10 cars, I want to cut down to 1 car. If I have a huge house, 5 houses, I want to cut down to 1 house. So how do we? I think there was another motto especially in Gandhian times, and when we were fresh in independence area, we used to use these words: simple living and high thinking. Sada Jivan Uch Vichar. So that is another gift from, like I hinted, our millionaires had very simple life. They were all about donating their wealth for philanthropic causes and living a very simple life, walking to their working places, living a very, very simple life. So that aparigraha is inbuilt into our tradition across the communities based on the renunciatory values and sannyas. And so sannyasi, any place in the world where sannyasis would not go hungry is India, because of this inherent respect for my book, I will give you one more example. When I was doing my master's in religion at Columbia University, my professor was Bob Thurman. He's still there. He's still teaching Buddhism. He's a friend of Dalai Lama. So he would say that this is his example. If I paint my face red, if I leave my clothes and have a stick in my hand and stand in the middle of a highway, national highway in India, chances are that within a day, I would start getting some money, free food. That is the inherent respect for sannyasis that India has. Anybody still largely, I think it's still true even in 21st century India, that sannyasis they continue to gain this inherent respect from Indian people because of this consciousness that have been passed through for millennia to support sannyasis, and not just support sannyasi, but live a life which is less on accumulation, less on greed, and more on need. If you can take public transport, take public transport. If 5 people can do carpooling in one car, do carpooling. If a bike is fine, if walking is fine to workplace, do that. If 3 generations can live together in one house under one roof, do that instead of dividing the houses. Still, thousands of families still have 3 generations living together only in India. Probably not only in India, but most, huge examples, many examples in India. So that's the aparigraha value. Ahimsa, aparigraha, and third is anekantvad, which you have been asking, saptabhangi. Right? Saptabhangi anekantvad is to not go and start killing other people just because others have a different point of view. I think huge examples of anekantvad we have in our, going back to at least 2000 years, right? When second time when Jewish temple was destroyed in Jerusalem, Jews come all the way to Kerala. They are shipwrecked to Kerala, and they live happily ever after for, like, of course, you already know all of them, just reiterating what we already know. For 2 millennia, Jews have been flourishing in India, thriving in India. They were called as Saturday oil pressers, Shanivar Telis, or Saturday oil pressers. That was their profession. And I confirmed this with my Jewish colleague in Dallas. When Jewish people left India and went to Israel, when Israel was created in around 1947, that was the first time Jews experienced some discrimination in their own native land. They never experienced any discrimination in India. That is a living example of saptabhangi anekantvad, that other is not to be killed just because they have a different point of view. Acceptance, tolerance, harmony. First example, Jews. Right? Second, many people believe, and some people disagree also, but I would like to add that also in this series of examples of tolerance and harmony is the example of Christians, that St. Thomas Christians have been living in India for millennia, for centuries and centuries. First time they experienced persecution is when European Christians came in South India and they started persecuting the St. Thomas Christians in Kerala. That's another example, I think, of harmony and acceptance of Christians within the Hindu community, within Indic communities.
But here I would like to add just one thing in this, because the Thomas Christians, they were basically Christians who came here in the 3rd century. And later they created this myth, unfortunately, after the evangelical Christians came in the 19th century, they created the myth of martyrdom of Thomas, which has absolutely no historical basis. I just want to add that, just for clarification.
What I want to say is
referring to that.
Right.
You are not referring, just for clarification.
Right. So I will just highlight, then Muslims. So the oldest mosques in the world, Mecca, Medina, of course, in Saudi, but in India also, starting from 900 CE, we have the first example of a mosque also in Kerala. The Jews, Christians, Muslims have been living in Kerala and across India for centuries without any significant, any kind of this unrest that has happened in last 200 years, more and more in India and now across the world. Also, then other example of Zoroastrians I already touched upon. When Zoroastrians came, they have been living in India for centuries, and now one of the biggest name in the business in India is Tata. Tata have a Zoroastrian heritage and Zoroastrian history, Parsis. Right? Parsis are Zoroastrians. So these are the, I think, really powerful examples of acceptance, harmony, living together, not just as a theoretical, philosophical, intellectual feast that saptabhangi might resort to sometimes, but these are the, I think, powerful living examples of acceptance of different point of views, acceptance of different religions, and on and on. I mean, we can go on and on. Even Buddhists, when they had to flee from northwest India and they had to go to Tibet, and from Tibet to China, Japan, and so on, because of the invasions from Middle East. So that's another, other part of the Islam's arrival is attack on Buddhist monasteries and temples. But so Buddhists had to leave and go to Tibet, and so, but when they had to come back to India, when Tibet was attacked by China, India was always open, right? India again openly embraced Dalai Lama, where he's still living for last so many decades in Himachal Pradesh in Dharamshala. So again, acceptance of Buddhists, acceptance of Zoroastrians, acceptance of early Muslims in Kerala, acceptance of Jews in Kerala, acceptance of Christians in Kerala in southern India in centuries ago, are all, I think, from my perspective, are I think powerful, great examples of acceptance, harmony, and these are the values that I think our next generations have to be told. I didn't know about these things when I was growing up in Rajasthan. I didn't know that one of the oldest mosques in the world is in India. Oldest Jewish community, Christian community, Zoroastrians are all India. They have all disappeared from their native land. Ancient Persia, which is currently Iran, have almost no Zoroastrians left. But in India, they survive, not just survive, they thrive in the form of a Tata Empire. These are all, I think, some examples from my perspective that have to be taught to our next generation of students.
So, Professor, thank you very much for this interaction. It has been a very great pleasure and a mind-expanding session with you, and particularly about these two important books, about your work in these two domains. And we wish you all the best. That we wish you will be writing more and more, and will be enlightening us more. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Aravindan. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you again for reviewing my books. That was such a great honor to be reviewed by you. I think those are the two best reviews. Nobody could do more justice to those books, or probably your reviews were really, really eye-opening, insightful. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for this interview.
Thank you, Aravindan. Thank you.